Hello, everyone. You're welcome to another episode of the Intrigued Woman podcast. My name is Adeola, and on today's episode, I have with me the beautiful writing coach LK. Her name is LaNette Kincaide. She's a Christian, an author, a writing coach, a wife, a mother, a grandmother. She's the owner of I Write Writing Academy, LLC, and the creator of the annual event I Write Conference. She has been featured in major news outlets as well as local magazines in Denver, Colorado. She's an Amazon self-published top seller and has published 4 books. She's passionate about teaching others how to write and sell their books and believe in their dreams. Welcome with me, LaNette Kincaide.
Hello, hello, hello. How y'all doing? It's nice to be
Hi.
here.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you, Adiola.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So let's learn more about who LaNette is. Who is LaNette? Can you give us a brief introduction about yourself and your background, your childhood? How was it like growing up as a girl child?
Um, what it was like for me, I was the youngest of my family. Um, I won't say that I was spoiled, but I will say that I probably was like a very busybody little child. Um, and I was just laughing as I came on here because I thought about this time with my mother where um, I thought about this time where like my dad, before I was able to go to school, he was my babysitter. And so every time my mom would get off work, I would yell out her name, Evelyn, Evelyn, Evelyn. And it wasn't proper to call adults by their first name, but I was doing that as a kid. And I thought about that just now. And I laughed so hard because I couldn't even believe that my mother allowed me to do that. You know, I couldn't have been no more than about 3 or 4, but I had that memory. But that's who I was as a kid, very inquisitive. If you got me a toy that would talk or make any type of noises, I would probably just break it open just to find out exactly how everything worked. And that's who I was as a kid.
Wow, that is so interesting. I would say we have like a connection there because I know growing up too, I was that kind of girl. I always try to, I want to know. I'm that kind of person. I like
Mhm.
asking questions.
Yeah.
So I think we have a tie there. We have something in common there.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. So I know you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a grandma.
Mhm.
So how many grandchildren do you have, if you don't mind sharing?
I don't mind sharing at all. My grandkids are so adorable. So I actually have 3 amazing grandbabies, and I'm a mother of 2 adult children. So I guess if you could say anything about empty nesting, I am a part of that empty nester type situation going on. I don't really look at it like that, but I have 3 amazing grandbabies. My latest grandbaby, Ruthie, which was named after my mom, actually was born in December 2nd, excuse me, December 2nd.
Oh, you don't look a bit like when I read your bio and I saw grandma, I'm like, oh my God, Lana doesn't look like that. She's so youthful, beautiful. I'm like, oh
Thank
my God,
you.
I need to ask you, what is the secret?
Oh my goodness. I for one, I didn't expect to be a grandmother so early. I used to always make a joke when I was in the workplace because my very first grandbaby, me and my husband laugh about this all the time, but my very first grandbaby, it was a rabbit. My daughter had a rabbit, which is a big it was a big it was kind of, we would talk about the rabbit around certain people welcomed it, and then certain people didn't because back home it's a big thing to eat rabbits, and here living in Colorado, it's not, people, that's unheard of to eat rabbits. So yes, I'm a grandmother, but I have to always acknowledge my very first grandbaby, which was my Mason, which was a rabbit. So yes, I am a grandmother. I have 3 beautiful grandchildren. I have 2 beautiful children, which is they're both in ministry, but I, like I'm blessed. All I can say is I'm blessed.
Absolutely. I can say without a shadow of doubt that you are blessed. I thank God for that. I thank God for you. I thank God for your
Yes.
family. So let's go into the topic for today.
Okay.
What is grief? What is grief? And has there been any time in your life where you felt that, or maybe you're still experiencing it? Can you share with us what grief is?
I will talk to you about grief, and I want to share 2 different sides of grief. And I'll just tell you my journey with grief. Um, I will say on January 2nd, excuse me, June 2nd, 2021. That's when I actually lost my mom. And when I lost my mom, I was already working with my church, Promises Church, over in Philadelphia, where the pastor is Pastor Taylor G. Martin. But when I lost my mom, I realized that I wanted to find out more about grief. I wanted to help other people with grief, because losing my mom, it was almost as if I was in, if I can just describe it to you, when I got the phone call that my mother had passed away, it was almost as if someone had hit me in a spot to where I just could not catch my breath. That's what it felt like. It felt like maybe if you ever imagine yourself being in a fight where you had got hit in the eye or you had got hit in your stomach or something like that. It was just, that's what it felt like. And I couldn't get past that point for a while. And so, long story short, I ended up getting a position at my church as a grief specialist. And then from that point, I still wanted to know more about grief. So I recently was certified as a grief specialist, because I wanted to know more about this thing called grief. Like, what is it and why? And so I'll give you 2 sides of grief. Before I had the opportunity of being like a certified grief specialist, I only looked at grief as the part of grief that we see, or the part of grief that everyone associates with grief, which is death. Okay. But after getting certified and going through classes, I realized that grief was any type of loss that you experience. And most of us start out experiencing grief as kids, but we don't ever associate it because we're like, I still have the people that I love. I don't, I haven't lost a loved one. So grief is beneath me. I haven't ever experienced grief. But in reality, if you've ever experienced losing a pet, losing, a dog, your dog get lost and never come back home, maybe a boyfriend breakup or things like that, divorce, anything that is a loss is associated with grief. And I had a chance to just really dig into it when I was taking the classes for it. But it's a lot of different things that we don't realize about grief because we're like, oh, a boyfriend, I can get another boyfriend, I can get another girlfriend. But in reality, it's grief because you would really grieve over a person. You grieve over friendships. You grieve over, maybe if you applied for a job and you didn't get it, that's also a form of grief. But those are things that we don't really associate with grief because we've only been conditioned to know grief from death, which is bereavement. It's a bereavement part of death, the grief part of death. So it's like we don't really associate anything else outside of death to grief.
Absolutely, it makes sense. And you mentioned something. Sometimes when in life, we've been conditioned to think about
Mhm.
grief as losing a loved one, but grief
Mhm.
is more than that. When you
Yes.
lose a job, when you lose a friendship that means so
Yeah.
dear to you, when you
Mhm.
lose, even people suffering from infertility.
Yes.
Infertility is the type of grief. because it's
Yes.
like you don't get to have what you're longing for. So
Yes.
absolutely, I agree with you 100%. I agree with you.
Yes.
So before we go into other questions, there's something that I want to ask you. What was your
Mhm.
relationship with your mom like?
Well, I want to share with you like two different sides of it. One, um, my dad left us when I was 11 years old. And at that same time, my mom had what was called a nervous breakdown. She was mentally ill. And so at the age of 16, I started being my mother's caregiver. So, yes, I was my mom's daughter, but in retrospect, it was almost as if I became her mom at the age of 16 because I had to make sure that I, paid rent. I had to make sure that I provided a roof over her head. I had to make sure that I had food for her. I also had to make sure that we kept her medicines straight as well. It was also things that I had to do on the back end, like fill out, government paperwork for housing, for food stamps, for Medicaid, Medicare, things of that nature. I had been responsible for that. Um, I, 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 I will say this. Um, my mother lived with me since I was 16 years old. So it was very, I won't say that we were close. um I know that's what people expect when someone dies, but it was like I had a job to do as a 16-year-old, and I focused more so on the job more than the relationship, if that makes any sense. I don't want to be that person that's like, oh my god, we were close, oh my goodness, yes, she was my mother. Yes, I loved her. Yes, I did not understand this thing called mental illness when I was taking care of my mother. The only thing that was left on my plate as a teenager is, don't let your mother run out of medicines. And I had seen how her behavior was when she ran out of medicine. So my focus was, oh my goodness, I can't allow my mother to run out of medicines. Now, did we have good times? Absolutely. Did we laugh together? Absolutely. I wasn't able to leave my mother alone. So on most trips that I took with my family and my husband, my mother had to be there with me. It was more so that, like, um, we had to babysit my mother, and that's what it was like in our household. So we took her places with us. If we had to go out to eat, we took my mother with us. Traveling, we had to take my mother with us. So um we had a relationship. We really had a relationship. And sometimes we had a lot of laughs, and sometimes we had to share a lot of tears. A lot of times I had to make decisions that I felt like only you know older people, or more experienced people would have to do. But I had to grow up making those decisions for my mother.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work for a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
But I guess you're better off for it because so many things you learned on the way, the experiences you garnered
Yes.
together during those times has helped you and formed you into the kind of woman you are today.
Yeah.
So, yes, you went through a lot, but everything is for a purpose, right?
Yeah. I don't regret it at all. I don't regret having to take care of my mother at all. I don't regret that at all. When I want to say that from the age of 16 up until 3 years ago, I was the caregiver of my mother. And it didn't stop necessarily because I was here and she was there, because I still filled out, government paperwork for her. I still, was paying certain bills for her. And so it didn't stop just because I moved, but the heaviness of the responsibility had shifted. What I will say is I'm grateful that I was chosen for that position because it taught me a lot in my own life of how to do certain things that had I not had that responsibility already, um, I wouldn't have known how to do that.
I'm so grateful you have everything you need. You know how not to do it and how to do it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
another thing that comes to mind is, do you think grief can be a good thing? Is grief a good thing or a bad thing? And how can we deal with grief?
Um, Let me say, I feel that grief is a good thing. One reason why, because a lot of people they live with grief throughout their life. Again, it's so many memories and it's so many things and it's so many dynamics of grief that people never unbox. They never open up. And so because of that, that grief lives with you. It doesn't just disappear just because you say, "Hey, grief be gone." You know, it stays with you. If you don't heal from it, it stays with you. Now, it can be good and bad parts of grief. For example, the memory that I just shared with you, um, that about my mother. I wouldn't have ever had that, I don't think that I would ever have those type of memories had I not be experiencing grief. It's so many good memories. During this program that I was in for grief, one of the things that they said is, "Hey, write down a time that you can remember about your mother." And I just broke down and started crying right there in class because I remembered this time where my mother had she was taking me out of the bathtub and she was drying me off, and she said, "Hey, I just figured out a way for us to be able, for you to be able to go to work with me." She was a teacher at the time. And I was like, "Okay, I'll go to school with you." And then she said, "Well, in order for you to go to school with me, you have to be on your best behavior. You have to do good." And I was like, "Yes, mom, I'll promise I'll be good." And so that was what I would consider like a good grief memory, a good memory. Um, but the main thing that I would say about grief is just facing it head on, whatever it is. If it's a memory of bad breakups, because I've been divorced before, I've lost cars before, I've lost houses before. So if you have those memories, face those memories head on in order for you to let the healing begin. Because one of the things that I realized with so much grief and so much baggage is the fact that you can't move forward with all the baggage that's tagging onto you. So, yes, there is good grief. Yes, it is bad grief. The main thing is just face it head on and move forward.
Face it head on and move forward. That's one of the ways to deal with grief. What
Yes.
if I'm stuck? What if I feel stuck with grief? How would you help me to come out of it?
I would suggest for you to do a one-on-one with a grief counselor or either a therapist. A lot of times um, we try to hold on to all of the things because a lot of times we are ashamed of how we feel because society makes us feel like if we're sad or if we're crying, that's a bad thing. Crying is not a bad thing. Being sad is not a bad thing. Even when you have times and moments where you can't get out of bed, because that's happened to me. I just literally could not get out of bed. Those are times that you do need to speak with someone. You do need to um, ask people for prayer, ask people for help. And I don't mean financial help. I'm meaning just help to say, "You know what? I just needed to talk to someone today. Can you be that ear?" A lot of times we're expecting like miraculous things to happen for us over things that we've been carrying around with us forever. Right. and it doesn't leave that easy. It didn't come that easy, so it can't leave that easy. So I would suggest for you to talk to a grief specialist, such as myself, or a therapist.
Absolutely. So, if anyone listening or watching us right now is having that feeling of being stuck inside of grief, you can reach out to LaNette. She's a certified grief specialist, or you can also
Mhm.
reach out to any therapist that can be
Any
of help to
therapist,
you.
yeah.
Don't hold on to grief. Let it go. All
Yes.
righty, let's keep going. So give us some tips. How can you turn grief into growth? How can you turn grief into purpose?
So one of the things that I done, I'm speaking from a personal perspective. One of the things that I started to do when my mother passed away, a month after she passed away, I started writing as if I was writing to her. And I would just write down different things that I could remember about us, about our relationship, about certain things that we were, that, we had done, or we had, at the time, it seemed like it was such a devastating moment that we had. But as I was writing it, it ended up being something super, super funny. And so I would suggest writing. I love writing. I know a lot of people, when you think of writing, people are like, oh my God, I can't write. I don't know how to write. Maybe some people will say my English is not good. Some people will say, well, I write like I talk, so that won't work. But ultimately, the only person that has to see your writing, unless you publish, is you. It's no one judging your writing but you. One and that goes back to some of the things that I done. I had to realize after writing this particular, just continuing to write right after my mother passed away, I wasn't going to publish, but then God said to publish. And I knew that his purpose for me to publish my book, Letters to Mom, that's available on my website, is just the fact that he was ready for people to heal. No more carrying around all this extra baggage, but just being healed of everything that you had gone through.
Absolutely. Start writing. And there's so many ways we can write now. You can write in journals, you can write even on your
Yes.
computer, on your iPad, on your tablet.
Yes.
Just keep writing so that you can, it's a way of relieving yourself
Hmm.
of the grief or the pain that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
Yes, so let's talk about your book, Letters to Mom. What
Yeah.
inspired you to write the book? Let's talk more about Letters to Mom. And when is it going to get published, and where can people get the book?
So I'll start with your latter question. People are able to purchase the book from my website, writingcoachlk.com, writingcoachlk.com. The book for pre-order is actually there. The book is actually going to be completely out. Two ways. I'm having an event that's coming on March 4th and March 5th. It's a writing conference, right? 2-day writing conference. So for the people that's coming to that writing conference, they will automatically get my book, Letters to Mom. For everyone else, the book is going to be out on Mother's Day, because this is a book about my mother. And so to go more into details, I was inspired. First of all, I wasn't going to write this book at all. And I'll tell you why. When my mother passed away, I wrote very transparently. I was very transparent in my writing. I didn't want to publish, but when I kept arguing back and forth with God, God showed me that by this book, healing was going to take place. And so that's one of the reasons. One of the things that happened to me is the feeling of when my mother passed away, I started to feel like an orphan. I started to feel like, because my dad was already gone. My dad had already passed away years before my mother passed away. And yes, it affected me, on Father's Day, it affected me, but God had already showed me that my dad was going to pass away. Like, I literally got a heads up about my dad. And so I wasn't quite worried about my dad. My dad had left us, he had checked out on us. I loved him, but um, when he passed away, I felt like I was good because my mom was still here, right? But when my mother passed away, I literally felt like, wow, I have no mother and I have no father. And so that was the most devastating part about losing a mother, because I felt motherless. It was okay for me to feel fatherless. It was okay for me to lose my father. I was still good because I had my mother. But when my mother died, it was just like I literally belong to no one. Like I don't belong to anybody. Um and it was just a different feeling that I wasn't quite prepared for. I wasn't quite prepared for it. And I just I knew that, excuse me, I knew that if I feel like this about my mother being gone, I just wondered how many other women feel like I feel right now. Like how many other people feel like I feel about losing a mother. Um, if I can just share this and be very transparent with you for a minute. Um, During this pandemic, it was so many people losing moms, losing relatives, losing family members. And you see it all the time on social media. And it was like they would lose their parent or they'd lose their uncle or grandparents and everything like that. And what do? You say, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm praying for you, you know, or you even quote a scripture, and you post it on their wall, right? But I was literally, I think me doing that, trying to not really console people because you never know how it feels until it actually happens to you. And so, although you're saying, hey, I'm praying for you, hey, I'm sorry for your loss, you know, I was literally oblivious to being one day in their shoes. And so, that's another thing that hurt me so bad about losing my mom, because I had to go back and recollect everyone that I had called myself, giving my condolences to, and realizing that they needed so much more than I gave them. Even with giving them a scripture, giving them I'm praying for you, I'm sorry for your loss. They needed so much more. And that's something that hurt me so bad when I lost my mom, because now I know what it feels like now.
Oh my God. It's okay. It's okay. I'm so glad you're able to share with us um, the reason behind your new book, Letters
Yeah.
to Mom. I guess you're dedicating it to Mom
Yes,
Evelyn. Her name
I
is Evelyn.
actually did. Do you mind if I read the
Yes,
dedication?
yes, please.
Because this is my tester book. It's already been edited. It's already good to go. It's just waiting for me to ship out for Mother's Day. And so the pre-orders are available now. It's $25. But let me read you the dedication. And I says here, I dedicate this book to my mom, Evelyn Ruth Taylor Lane. You are gone, but you will never be forgotten. Thank you for introducing me to writing. I will never forget the gift you shared with me. Love always. And that's the dedication that's in Letters to Mom.
That, the Bible talks about um, God places the solitary in families.
Yes.
So when God places the solitary in families, it doesn't necessarily mean your biological family. It can mean
Yes.
your church family, friends around you, God, there's a purpose for which you're still here. And one of
Yeah.
the reasons is what we're doing right now, to give hope to other people who might be
Yes.
experiencing grief at this time,
Yes.
and to let them know that there is purpose in whatsoever any one of us is going through. Thank you so
Yes.
much for sharing that.
Thank you.
All right. So where can people connect with you? Where can they connect with you? And Letters to Mom will be out in May. May is
It's
Mother's Day, but you
yes.
can pre-order now on writingcoachlk.com.
Yes.
So yeah, just let us know where we can connect with you.
So I want to share this with you as well because I know here we're talking about my role as a grief specialist. My passion, I'm passionate about writing. And so I also teach people how to write their books. That's what I do. That's what I love. That's what I'm passionate about. And so anyone that is wanting to know more about writing, telling their story, sharing their story in the form of a book, they're able to go and visit my website, set up consultations. I have a free 15-minute consultation just to see if writing a book is actually for you at this point. But all of that is on my website at writingcoachlk.com. And I thank you so much for allowing me to share that. That's amazing.
Absolutely. I'm here to remember the purpose for the Intrigued Woman is to cheer women on, women doing great things in the community,
Thank you.
women doing things that people do not know about, and to try to put you, even though we don't have the power like Oprah, but we're trying, to cheer
Yes,
other,
yes, yes.
to cheer other women on and let them
Hmm.
be the best version of themselves. Let people see what you're doing, the lives
Yeah.
you're changing, the lives you're transforming through your messages and through your story. So yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you
It's
so
nice.
much.
It's been a nice time talking with you, Coach LaNette, and I thank you so much for coming on today's episode of the Intrigued Woman podcast. I hope you come again another time. Maybe
Thank you.
next time we can talk about how to be an author, how to,
Yes.
all this good stuff.
I would absolutely love it. I appreciate you for having me on. I think grief is something that we have to deal with in the perspective of other things outside of the bereavement section. So I really thank you so much for giving me this platform. I also thank my pastor, Pastor Taylor, for allowing me to bring grief into the church because now we have a grief circle at the church. And I I want to say that I owe all of that to my mother. If someone had told me, hey, let's start a grief circle, I would have been like, go right ahead, have at it. But it was basically because of my mom's death that shook me to the core, that made me want to do those type of things. And I'm hoping that this thing called grief will spread where people are now ready to open up this box and now start to heal. That's what my whole purpose of all of this is for.
Absolutely. Any last words you want to share with anyone listening or watching us right now before we go?
Um, I want to say for anyone that's watching, don't be afraid of your voice. Be in tune with your voice. Know that your purpose is to share your experience. A lot of times we get so caught up in, oh, I lost my car. Let me suppress that. Oh, I had a breakup. Let me suppress that. In this season, I want to let you know that do not continue to suppress what you're going through, because what your experience is going to be a blessing for someone else. One of the things that I realized in going through this experience with grief and everything, people are like, oh my goodness, thank you for being transparent. Thank you for sharing that. So don't be comfortable with your voice. Be comfortable with your voice. Your voice is your purpose. Your voice is your purpose. So whether that's in the form of writing, whether that's in the form of podcasting, whether that's in the form of ministry of some sort, be okay with using your voice. It is a big purpose behind using your voice. So that's the only thing I wanted to say. And thank you again, Adiola, for this opportunity. You're amazing. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, LaNette. Oh my goodness. We still need to talk after now. Don't go yet. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. And remember, according to Coach LaNette, be proud of your voice. Use your voice. There is
Yes.
power and purpose in your voice. See you
Yes.
again next time. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for now. Bye.